Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Jonty Pearce. I'm the editor of Call Center Helper, and welcome to today's webinar, 3 strategies to make outbound calling more effective. 3 quite interesting strategies overall. In terms of the agenda for today, I'll be starting off by going through 5 tips for outbound calling. We'll then move on to Dave Ogden from Aspect, who will be talking about 2 strategies for outbound calling. The first is building intelligent contact strategies. The second is about the use of answer machine detection. And then Antonia Loizides from Aspect will be taking through the 3rd strategy of optimizing your workforce in an outbound environment. So I think topics that should be of interest to many people involved. Before we get into it, what I'd like to do is I'm just going to bring up a poll now, and if you could all vote on this. What percentage of your call volume is outbound? The choices are 0 to 19%, 20 to 39%, 40 to 59%, 60 to 79%, or 80 to 100%. So the results we've got there are, looks like the majority have got a fairly light degree of outbound of the 0 to 20% range. And we've also got a number of, about a quarter of the audience are pretty heavily into outbound, between 80 and 100%. So there's a bit of a range there. I'm now going to share the next poll with you, which is, what is your main use of outbound dialing? So I'll just put the details up here. Your choices are telesales, market research, proactive customer service, appointment setting, or debt collection. Unfortunately, you can only take one choice. So if you put in what you think is the most likely, if your center doesn't match anything in the box, if you could put in the question box what it is that you do, would be interesting to see there. So I'm just going to close the results here now, and we'll share them with everybody. So the answers here, and Dave, I don't know if this is typical of the results you see. Top choice is telesales, a little bit of market research, quite a bit of proactive customer service, which is quite nice to see, and debt collection. Dave, have you seen a big increase in recent years of proactive customer service?
Yeah, I think so, especially in the kind of space that we're working in at the moment with customer being king, and we have voice of the customer departments appearing in a lot of businesses that we see. I will be honest and say I'm a little surprised at debt collection being perhaps down at the 16% mark. I would have expected that probably to be around about the same sort of areas, telesales maybe. However, it's possibly just the people we have on the call.
Yeah, and I think that's also we've only given people the chance of 1 vote on there. So I'm just going to go through 5 tips for outbound calling. These are really sort of observations I've taken from call centers that I've seen around, and they're to do with some of the human factors. The first tip I'd like to share with you is, if you put in calls out, the first is to really establish if it's a convenient time to speak with people. Many customers don't want to talk to you, and I know that's one of the problems in outbound, but some of the reasons for that is because the timing may be wrong. So for instance, if you phone someone up during EastEnders, even if they might be receptive at other times, they're probably not going to want to speak to you. So one thing I don't hear enough of in contact centers is now a convenient time to speak with you? So I think that's one tip. If anyone's tried that, if you'd like to leave your feedback on that, that would be quite interesting. The other one is to establish the prime time to call. Now, I know a lot of people have done this, but we do tend to work off lists of people without necessarily looking at some of the demographics. So for instance, from your statistics, you can see when is likely to be the best time to call, when you get your best conversion rate. So for instance, retired people are often at home during the day, whereas working people tend to be in the evening. But I think really, I mean, it may seem obvious, but the best time to call someone is at a time that you've agreed with them. So if you're calling, we know we've got a lot of telesales people to give a sales quote, you can actually agree a call with the customer of the best time to call them back, and they're likely to be a lot more receptive to that. Answer machine, we're going to be talking about answer machines a bit later on, but hitting an answer machine isn't necessarily a negative thing. I was with an outsourcer on Friday, and what they did is they actually left messages on the answer machine saying, could you give me a call back? And what they found is that it comes back to this convenient time. The customer will then call you back at a time when it's more convenient for them. And they found that actually messages left on answering machine when they called back in had a 3 times higher conversion rate than for a straight outbound call. So answer machines aren't necessarily bad. One of the other problems, and I'm going to play you a scenario here, is, and I hear a lot of these types of calls going through. Hello, can I speak to Mr. James Smith? Yes, speaking. Hello, Ms. Smith, how are you doing today? And I wonder if you can guess what type of call that's likely to be. And it's what I call the phony rapport, trying to build rapport too early. And I think people are getting very wise to that and say, I certainly know if I get called, how are you doing today? Instantly it's a sales call, instantly I'm defensive, rather than saying, you know, this is what you're calling about. I'd be interested to see if people have got any experience in doing different messages like that. And my last tip is to be careful with outbound security. And one of the things we quite often do in contact centers, and there's often good reasons for this, but we phone through to someone and they'll say, before you start, I need to ask you some security questions. And the problem with this is that we instantly get people thinking defensively, and there's all sorts of outbound call center scams going about now. So people are getting very, very suspicious of putting an outbound call to them. And if you think about it, who originated the call? There's no great saying that if you put a call out to someone that you are genuine. So I think that's a real challenge that we all have to deal with. So those are very briefly my 5 tips for outbound calling. Before I hand across to Dave, we're going to go through another poll. We talked about answer machines briefly. Would like to know if you use answer machine detection. In there, the details up on the screen. So we've got 29% using answering machine detection, 64% of you are not using answer machine, and 8% are not sure. So I'm going to now pass across to the baton across to Dave Ogden from Aspect, and Dave will take us through 2 of the strategies. The first one is about building intelligent customer contact strategies, and the second one is about the use of answer machine detection. Dave, if you'd like to go ahead.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Jonty. So we just wanted to kind of talk to you today. If I get the screen to move. Sorry. So initially we wanted to talk to you around prioritizing outbound contacts in a blended environment, making the most effective use of the contacts that we make, and also just to touch on understanding the people who we want to contact. I think Jonty there said about looking at the best time to call, so just expanding that point out a little bit further. Then I'd just like to touch on answer machine detection. I'm actually a little surprised by almost 30% using answer machine detection, which I think is really good. Going into a little bit more around the 2-second rule for those perhaps who aren't, and then looking at how our compliance departments within organisations are now beginning to take more of an active role since the latest Ofcom revisions. And then my colleague Antonia is going to be talking through optimal agent utilisation. I think perhaps in the past a lot of workforce planning, a lot of workforce management is focused on inbound. So Antonia will be talking around that. Then looking at some of the other, some of the more breakthrough technologies, if you will. So looking at speech analytics and how quality can really help drive the customer experience, or around promises to pay or right party connect. And then finally driving corporate strategies at an agent level through performance management. So for myself, I'm going to start on call blending and intelligent data management. So I think in the past, we've always seen that call blending has always been a way to either cover exceptional inbound call volumes or to reduce the idle time of inbound agents. It's never really been conceived of as something that outbound teams do other than to support inbound almost. I think since we've seen the Ofcom regulations change around presentation of CLI, we're beginning to see an increase in the number of inbound calls being generated as a result of outbound. So it's really interesting. So I think we're all probably very well aware of inbound and outbound skill sets and how different they are. So why would we consider sending what is effectively an outbound call to an inbound advisor? Whilst it may be returned to a specific inbound team or department via whatever telephone number the customer is given, how much information is available to understand why the customer is calling in? So just consider a customer experience for 1 second. So they get a call that probably they weren't expecting. They call back on the number provided and either get put through to an IVR or maybe even put through to an advisor straight away, who basically is unable to provide any real detail about the call and probably going to be start asking for some kind of identification, verification information, which, as Jonty kind of touched on a little bit earlier, customers are becoming more aware of security arrangements. And I suppose we all have to put ourselves in the customer's perspective. How would we feel about giving sensitive data out over the phone from a phone call we potentially weren't expecting? Also, if you look at the experience for a customer, we're all trying to, a lot of companies I should really say, are looking now more at the brand of the company in terms of the voice messages that are left or played to the customer. So how is that providing a consistent experience with a consistent skill set to help improve overall performance? My supposition is that it's probably being handled in a different way. If you do have a unified solution, what I mean by unified solution is a solution that does both inbound and outbound, or if you have some kind of clever CTI, CLI can either be captured and the customer records potentially looked up from the dialer database itself and then presented to your outbound advisor, so it makes it look and feel like an outbound call. Even if the customer's CLI isn't present, an account number could be potentially requested, or alternatively, when the customer says, why were you calling, it's almost certain the outbound advisor is going to have a lot more information than the inbound advisor in the first place. You're able to look at more of an optimized calling list as return calls after inbound contact don't occur, and there's also no requirements for intraday do not call lists. How many times have we seen customers calling to the inbound environment to only get an outbound contact later today? More prevalent in the collections environment where they have only limited time to contact customers, but still even in a telesales environment or a customer service environment, it's not going to deliver the sort of experience you're going to need to deliver to get a successful return. And then finally, data integrity will be maintained. All call outcomes will have an accurate, all records will have an accurate call outcome, so that you understand exactly what it is that the customer did and didn't do. I think at this point, I don't mean to be pithy with this, but understanding your customers is key to a campaign success. It's a very, very simple thing to say. Ultimately, your dialing strategies, whatever they happen to be, be it customer service, collections, telesales, proactive customer service, anything, all depend on the granularity and depth of available data elements. And this will determine the level of sophistication you can achieve within your contact center. Even such simple data insights such as date of birth can really help improve right party connect rates and also data penetration. Database technology as well as dialing technology has really improved over the last, say, 5 to 10 years, and typically we're now seeing any dialer able to provide data uploads on a nightly basis in the background so it doesn't affect performance. But do they really contain the data you need to improve future contacts? Knowing which number was called, the time it was made, and the outcome can help inform future campaigns the best time to dial. Utilising this data can also inform contact strategies for customers you may never have called, just by simply looking at potentially the customer's age, the amount of account activity, potentially the amount of money you're looking to collect, the reason for the proactive customer contact. Is that off the back of a complaint? Is that of something they've conducted with your organisation that you're looking for feedback on? You can start making some assumptions around what it is you're trying to do with these customers. Reviewing demographic data elements such as age, location, recent activity, they can help predict the customer attitudes, as I've kind of already touched on. It does work better in high-touch industries, of course, such as collections, because it can help build a better picture of actual client behaviour, so each and every single one of your clients. However, maybe lower touch channels you typically will have a longer time frame with which to contact customers. So you're not having to necessarily contact or try to attempt the customer 3, 4, 5 times a day. You can choose to allow them to roll over day on day, which gives you more of an opportunity to look at those things, and that gives you a better chance of creating a demographic behavioural model. You do need to consider, though, what you consider to be a success. Is it right party connects, RPCs, or maybe promises to pay, P2Ps, or is it sales? Is it customer experience? Is it complaints versus proactive customer contact care, or maybe welcome calls? The behaviour in all of these situations can easily be very different. I don't think implementation needs to be particularly very expensive either. Most contact centres will have some kind of data warehouse already containing customer data and probably previous contact outcomes. As it stands today, to comply with the Ofcom regulations, you've got to have at least 6 months of detailed calling history, so you've got at least 6 months history there today. Introducing data elements or scores may require some form of change control in your business, but this should be relatively simple to achieve. It can either be done as a test campaign, or for those of you who already have a model office system, you can effectively put it into that environment first to prove the concept before rolling it out. And then building or new or amending existing processes with a dialer should typically be done by your administration teams. That's the dialer management team, or maybe your marketing teams who look after that type of technology. The data models do need to be refreshed regularly. Consumer behaviour does change quite constantly. If you consider the run-up at the moment to Christmas, I would guess that most telesales environments are probably experiencing maybe their busiest month of the year, whereas the collections environment may start to see some of that demand diminish whilst customers are spending money. Also, from a proactive customer contact perspective, probably very busy this month as well. Into January, that's very likely to swap around. So the collections teams are likely to become more busy, and the sales environment may be a little less busy. By what I'm trying to say is, if you look at previous year's trends, they can be useful to augment the models you build to give you a better forecast. So you should understand where your calling patterns exist. And I think most importantly, the most expensive resource you're all going to have is going to almost certainly be a workforce. Somewhere around 70% of your overall cost will be on your workforce. And you also have to consider that your most valuable commodity, is your customer base. So maximising agent productivity by just looking at simple data elements whilst maintaining or even improving customer satisfaction is probably more critical now than ever before. Just looking now at AMD and the role of compliance. So AMD, we're all probably aware that AMD's answer machine detection technology was ultimately created to improve performance. Back in the 80s and the 90s, it was used to filter out no contacts, and then that meant that call center advisors were able to spend more time actually speaking to customers. Answer machine detection technology, I think, was quite basic to begin with. If we consider that most answer machines were ultimately a tape-based analog recorder that you recorded your voice on, and then you had some kind of beep or a click of some description, and then it played just a simple pre-recorded message. And algorithms have had to evolve quite significantly. The advent of digital answering machines and mobile voicemail have really changed the game quite significantly. AMD accuracy is ultimately controlled by how well telephony hardware can detect sound energy on the line. And I think that some dialer manufacturers towards the late 90s started to build their own telephony cards, whilst they felt they could tune the technology rather than going out to a vendor and effectively having a black box solution within their environment. But why is that really important? So Ofcom regulations have now restricted the amount of time answer machine detection technology has to operate, and that's created what we now call or refer to as the 2-second rule. A typical example of the process, just so that most of you understand the kind of timings involved, ultimately you're going to have some kind of off-hook event, so the call is going to be answered approximately 0.85 of a second late, and that's typically the amount of time it takes to start the greeting after someone picks up the phone. In a digital answering machine or an answer BT1571 as such, typically that begins slightly quicker. You then have approximately 0.4 of a second, which is typically how long it takes to complete the greeting. and then after that you will get a period of silence if it's a real person. If it's an answering machine, you're probably going to hear some kind of droning nonsense, a little bit like my voice right now, listening, basically telling you that I'm unavailable to be spoken to, and please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. So you can probably very easily tell that there's going to be a difference in the amount of sound energy that goes down the line. A simple hello and a silence has quite a significant peak, whereas a constant voice will continue to produce a relatively consistent level of voice energy throughout the time. And obviously, once the system has decided what it is, you also then have to route that through to an advisor. So what we're beginning to see, I think, is that some manufacturers of dialers are getting to a point where they're beginning to measure salutation, because that gives the technology almost a further second to which it can create the algorithm, or is allowed to run the algorithm before having to pass through to an advisor. I think the most significant implication of using AMD is around false positives and the calculation of false positives. For those of you who are unaware, which I doubt will be very many, a false positive is effectively where the AMD technology believes a live contact is an answering machine and then hangs up. Typically, that will continue time and time again because the customer is going to answer the phone in the same way, which produces the same conditions, which the algorithm will interpret probably the same way. And Ofcom have made it extremely clear that they will not accept dialer manufacturers' benchmarks or lab results when it comes to what the false positive rate of a particular environment is, and therefore requires businesses to conduct their own. But I don't think the testing has to be costly nor time consuming. So three scenarios which we could look at is to create a test campaign, potentially, if your dialer is able to route calls out through to effectively a test campaign. That test campaign would effectively have a series of advisors attached to it, where all they're going to do is hopefully handle answering machine calls. If they were to handle a customer, or if they were to get a customer passed through, then they could obviously speak to the customer, deal with the call as they would do normally, end the call in such a way as to denote the fact that the answering machine detection technology was wrong. Conversely, you could consider devising a callback campaign. So this is where AMD calls or outcomes are then effectively redialed or rescheduled for a period of time later. Ofcom have said that this is something, or they mentioned this within their latest consultation, but obviously to create robust figures, that redial would need to be done within quite a limited and short time frame. And finally, also within the Ofcom consultation, and certainly whilst less robust, and Ofcom did mention this, is that you are able to route calls through to an IVR potentially, or to some form of automated scripting tool, where it could give the customer the option to be put through to an advisor effectively. Please press 1 if you are a real person. Whilst possible to use, if the customer were to choose not to speak to you and therefore hang up, it would never give you an accurate picture of what your false positive rate would actually be. So in conjunction with these changes, the 24-hour rule is also introduced. Where this becomes important is if you place a call to the same number detected as an answer machine the same day, you have to guarantee the presence of a live operator. However, whilst restrictive, simple or more intelligent contact strategies can help mitigate this impact. If you switch the telephone numbers you attempt throughout the day so that you don't try the same telephone number that you've had an answer machine on, would be one way of overcoming it. Consider running AMD perhaps only at certain times of day, and perhaps only on certain numbers where you don't expect customers to be, and maybe have a look at using it on home telephone numbers during the day potentially if you're forced to use them. Conversely, or finally I should say, not conversely, if contact is critical, you could reserve these customers for your best times to contact and then leave AMD off. So where before, perhaps before the rules would change, AMD would be used all of the time, day in, day out, maybe consider switching it on and off for periods of time throughout the day to really make the most of the contacts that you have. If you do have an IVR solution which you're able to route AMD calls through to, Ofcom intimated potentially that compliance could be maintained if a live operator was available to take that call from the customer. So something that you yourselves would need to consider and demonstrate the consumer benefit as such, but certainly something you could potentially look at. At the same time as the A&D changes, Ofcom increased the fines available up to £2 million, which now makes them 4 times more expensive than if the ICO were to find something wrong within the contact centre. And as a result, compliance departments, or perhaps in smaller organisations, board members are now very aware of outbound calling due to this. If they, meaning compliance or potentially the board members, have not been involved with Ofcom before, interpretation may not align with what your business needs are. And as a result, compliance can sometimes either be forced or productivity can suffer as a result. And it doesn't have to, it really doesn't. If compliance isn't engaged, they probably are going to be very, very soon. And a simple matter of going to the compliance departments, explaining the Ofcom rules and working with them will help build that trust that the organisation, or specifically the operation, have that knowledge and therefore are already in control of it and already dealing with it, whilst also educating them. So rather than having them interpret words off of a page, which could have some far-reaching productivity consequences, it gives you that ability to effectively explain how the rules need to be interpreted, or what they should be interpreted as, and then work with them on business implications and business installation. So that's what they're the two topics I wanted to cover off for now, and I'd just like to hand over to my colleague Antonia to go through more of the workforce optimization strategies in outbound contact centres.
Thank you, Dave.
Just before we do that, we've got some comments that have. Just before we do that, we've got a few comments that have come in from a few people. The first is from Michelle, who said that their use of Outbound has been for customer meter readings. Mike uses Outbound for renewing software licenses. A couple of interesting comments that have come in through. Simon has said to my comment about phony rapport building, that he just had the same conversation with one of his agents and had to warn them of that. Simon says that, however, some agents, it seems to work really well, the rapport building, and perhaps it's due to their tone. But before we dip into Antonia's, we've just got a poll that we're going to put up on the. Just going to put a poll up on the screen for you, and that poll is: do you use workforce optimization technologies in your outbound call center? It's with you now. We've got a total of 32% of people have said yes, and 57% no. So I guess certainly the 57% of no are going to have a bit of a treat from Antonia's presentation. So, Antonia, I'd like to hand across to you now.
Okay. Dave, I wonder if you can help me out with my slides there.
Okay, sorry, we've just got a challenge on handing over that. Let's pass it across.
Great. Great. Okay. Thanks. Well, thanks everyone for joining. It is quite interesting to see how few people actually use workforce optimization technologies in their contact centers. I'm going to broaden it. It's more than just workforce management. Workforce optimization encompasses a number of other practices, and the reason why is because it's no longer just about ensuring that you've got the right number of people sitting in the chairs when you need them to. It's actually more than that, workforce optimization. It's really more about ensuring that they're also proficient and that they're communicating the messages of your which are aligned with your corporate strategies. And if you take a look at what some of the top priorities were listed by CEOs in a recent survey, you'll see that the first three there, all link to the customer, or really relate to the customer. They're about retaining the customer, maintaining a competitive advantage, potentially by providing differentiating customer service, and attracting the customer. The fourth one there, attracting and retaining skilled staff, is really an enabler of the first three. And this puts your contact center staff and agents at the front line of customer retention, satisfaction, and advocacy. So it's essential to make sure that this key resource, which we've already heard said a number of times today, is your most costly, is not just effective and efficient and in the right place at the right time, but is also proficient and working towards the same strategic goals to the CEO. And this is really where workforce optimization comes in and is differentiated in terms of just workforce management. Right, so if we go to the next slide, please. Great. So how does workforce optimization influence the point of contact? So workforce management will ensure that you have the right number of people in the right place at the right time. And in an outbound environment, this means making sure that you have the best skilled agents making calls during those periods in the day when you expect the best outcomes. And that you're also making time for all important offline activities to take place. So you're making sure that agents are getting the time to get trained and all the coaching that they need, for example, during periods where success rates are potentially not that high. So as mentioned already, agents in your call center are at the front line of customer interactions, and it's critical that they're proficient and executing correct actions and behaviors at the point of contact. So this is really where recording and quality monitoring comes in, and even speech analytics, which will enable you to monitor and engage your agents about their customer interactions and drive best practices where possible and make improvements where needed. But now performance management will ensure that agents and supervisors and line managers are all aligned with the key objectives of the business by working towards the key performance indicators published to their desktops each day. A culture of continuous improvement is usually facilitated through work performance management tools, which can trigger alerts and coaching plans where key performance indicators are not met. So using these practices, you're able to directly influence the outcome of each customer interaction in a positive way. So customers will be encouraged to buy more, be more loyal, pay on time, and promote your brand. So hopefully this is a small introduction to a much broader topic than workforce management, because what we're talking about is taking it to the next level really and optimizing your workforce to give you the best chance of driving the kind of behaviors out of your customers that you need them to. We're going to look a little bit in more detail now at workforce management, which traditionally hasn't had a very big role in outbound planning, perhaps because the tools that are generally available haven't truly taken into account the nuances of the outbound world. We're not looking at a demand-driven environment. Instead, what we're looking at is when the best time is to contact our customers and how we can optimize our staff around that. So the goal of workforce management is to ensure that you're utilizing the most expensive resource in the most effective manner possible. In an outbound environment, this means ensuring that you are staffed during those periods in the day when you expect outcomes to be best, when you're achieving right party connect rates at a high level. So forecasting based on connect and right party connect rates, list sizes, and campaign strategies is core to working out when to schedule your staff. And moreover, workforce management forecasting helps you to set long-term budgets for recruitment, run what-if analyses around different types of campaigns, as well as negotiate contracts and short-term shift changes on a weekly and daily basis. In a lot of outbound environments today, that is done just based on gut feel, experience, and so on and so forth. Workforce management will offer you a more scientific approach to working these things out. And where a campaign is slowing down because of the maturity of a list, for example, you're able to reforecast, allowing you to make schedule adjustments and better plan and optimize offline activities like mandatory training and meetings and breaks and things like that. This will ensure that your occupancy levels are maintained during periods where core outcomes are not predicted to be that high. And staff utilization can also be maximized by monitoring agent adherence to all scheduled activities. A few minutes late back from a break per agent per day can mount up, costing the business hundreds of thousands a year in lost occupancy. Schedule adherence is a huge benefit to contact centers looking to drive occupancy rates. So while a culture of Big Brother monitoring is very effective in driving adherence management, it's also advisable to help agents achieve compliance targets by giving them up-to-date access to their schedules. Employee self-service tools will not only provide a view on all schedule information, but will also notify agents of schedule changes immediately they are planned, and even remind agents to go on breaks and meetings and trainings and so on at the right time. Empowerment tools such as these have also had a very positive impact on employee morale and reduction in attrition rates, and increases in agent engagement scores are often attributed to workforce management employee self-service tools. So moving on to quality and speech analytics. Most of us already record calls for compliancy purposes. It's also important to record agent screens, because this gives us the most holistic view of customer interaction possible. And compression formats today allow us much more capability to archive these recordings than in the past. We have heard customers voice concerns about storage and so on and so forth. But recording is now more viable because of these compression formats, recording both screen and voice. It's also important to have a robust method of accessing archived recordings, especially when you're wanting to play back a recording based on a selection of business rules. So that might mean searching for a particular customer who's called for a particular reason. But the search can also be based on the data that's been entered into the application on the agent's desktop if you've recorded the screen as well. For example, you can retrieve calls based on promises to pay value or a customer account number, for instance. So recording and archiving both voice and screen gives you better option for call search and retrieval. And then when you choose to quality score these calls and screens, we'd obviously advise that you share these evaluations with supervisors and agents, because this will allow you to apply a best practice culture by sharing examples of great customer experiences, and also to use quality recordings as coaching tools to help improve customer experience. Where quality scoring helps you to sample a portion of your calls, speech analytics takes it up a notch by allowing you to categorize and analyze all of your calls. Where you're only sampling some of your calls through quality, speech analytics will take all of them and do the analysis for you in an automated way. Today's speech analytics technologies can help you very quickly mine your calls to get a better understanding of best practices and to weed out regulatory and non-compliance. Speech analytics is becoming increasingly important to outbound environments which are mandated to provide customers with specific information or to show empathy and understanding during difficult conversations. And as we'll see next, once anomalies are identified through speech analytics, call centers can use tools such as performance management to help drive improvement down to an agent level. Speech analytics probably has its best take-up in outbound environments in our experience. So looking at performance management, as we discussed in our first slide, it's important that objectives set at a corporate level are fed all the way down through to the frontline staff in our call centers so that everybody is working towards the same goal. The challenge this presents to contact centers is how best to communicate these objectives in a way which derives meaningful agent behaviors. If the corporate objective is to sell a particular product or retain a high customer value, this could translate to achieving a specific objective around revenue per call or promises to pay at an agent level, a specific key performance indicator that an agent can identify with and work to achieve. So it's critical to define these key performance indicators effectively and then to provide them to agents and team leaders and managers with automatic and up-to-date access to these on a daily or an intraday basis, allowing them to view their achievement of their goals. Performance dashboards taking feeds in from systems containing these metrics, such as the dialer, workforce and quality management systems, CRM systems, etc., which are made available to agents, help to empower them to manage their own performance. Agents can adjust their behaviors to help them achieve their targets before their monthly review meetings with their managers. Moreover, where there are lapses in targets, supervisors and managers can immediately be alerted, allowing them to plan for corrective action to be taken. Using a robust performance management tool, analysis can be done to trend and drill down on agents and key performance indicators which need attention, and coaching and performance improvement plans can be initiated to help struggling agents and supervisors correct their performance and achieve their targeted KPIs, thereby ensuring that the business is aligned in terms of the corporate strategies and everyone in the business is working towards the same goal. So that hopefully gives you an idea of workforce optimization rather than just workforce management within the outbound contact center. I think all that's really left for me to say is that it's a key strategy to ensuring that your outbound environment is effective and efficient, but also ensuring that you're continuously striving to achieve your key business objectives at every level of the operation. Jonty, that was all I had for you today.
Right, I'm afraid everyone, we appear to have lost Jonty at the moment. We're having some serious weather issues, and I know that where we actually normally have our office, we've been having a blackout at the moment. So you'll have to bear with me while I try and hopefully sort it all out. So we're going to go on to some questions and answers. So
I've just noticed a comment over there from somebody who said that their workforce optimization consists of a spreadsheet, and I can understand that because I think it's very typical in outbound environments that workforce optimization is done on a spreadsheet. There is a lot of benefit in investigating some of the technologies that I've mentioned today around workforce optimization beyond Microsoft Excel.
Right, okay. So I'll try and go on to some questions and hopefully everyone will be able to get through. So we've had a question from Chris saying, what are the tangible benefits realised through call blending, and what can we expect to benefit from efficiencies or performance? So any ideas, Dave?
Sure. Yeah, of course. So thanks for the question. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to kind of talk about the sort of benefits that a particular organisation can get out of call blending without actually having done some form of review or understanding exactly how it is that environment works. In some organisations, we're seeing between a 15 and 20% uplift in performance from the return calls, and maybe that's perhaps where Jonty was alluding to the 3 times more likely a little earlier. But some of the immeasurable benefits almost are around understanding customers better. And I'm not really sure how much more we can go into detail on this particular call. But thanks for the question, and I think it's certainly something that has to be measured as a result of implementing any form of blending organisation.
Okay, great. We've had a question from James. He said, we use daytime and evening filters based on the prosperity model. We haven't seen much of an uplift in hit rates, and he wants to know if you had any suggestions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, understanding the best time to contact the customer isn't enough. It's also understanding on which telephone number to contact them as well. So maybe have a look at the telephone numbers you're dialing. So typically you may have maybe work numbers in the evening, work numbers in the customer records, and maybe have a look at trying to exclude these in the evening, and maybe even look at using more mobiles in the evening as well, as you know that customers will be around. I mean, in this 24-hour world of ours, I think that customer behaviour is getting progressively later and later in terms of getting home and being able to do things. So maybe have a look at the telephone numbers which you're dialing as well. So it's about understanding not just the propensity of the customer to answer at a particular time, but also the telephone number which they're going to answer on.
Right, brilliant. Scott's asked, is there a requirement under Ofcom rules to leave a message on connected calls which were not presented to an agent?
There is a requirement if you were to drop the call, yes. That's Ofcom's abandoned call message, where it has to contain the name of the company, a telephone number which to call the customer back on, for the customer to call back in on, but you're unable to provide any form of marketing information on there as well. So on a connected call that you intend to drop, yes. What other scenarios you would have a connected call that you wouldn't pass it through to an advisor, I'm not quite sure of. So maybe a follow-up on that later or something.
All right, great. Just going to try and find... Do you think workforce management is more for larger organisations? Zoe's asked.
Yeah, I think that there is a point at which you need to start considering a workforce management tool. Generally, we have examples of customers who start to move away from, Excel spreadsheets typically onto more sophisticated technologies when their contact centers start to grow beyond between 40 and 60 agents. Most importantly, you could also be facing several complexities in your environment. For example, you have extended operating hours and automatically scheduling your agents is becoming too onerous to do manually. Adherence, if it's a very big issue, if you have agents working at home, for example, and you wanted to do some tracking of them remotely, it might become feasible for you to look at a workforce management tool. So it really does depend. It definitely does depend on your size. I would say definitely beyond 60 agents you should start considering it, but also based on the complexities within your environment, you might want to start considering it if you're challenged in terms of your staffing.
Wonderful. I'm back online now. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, apologies. We, contrary to some of the comments that have come through saying words like "he's nipped down the pub" or "tell him to get a pint in," unfortunately we've had a power outage at this end, but glad that we could carry on. A couple of comments in from a number of people who've said that we haven't discussed SMS as an outbound strategy, and I think that's certainly a very valid point to make. Dave, does SMS fit into part of your product set?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think one of the follow-up questions to that is kind of where do we see the contact center going in the next few years? And I think that from a proactive perspective, it's moving more away from just pure voice to also other contact means. So you're absolutely right. SMS as well as email is definitely a place where it's going. As to how much moves to SMS, in a blended environment, or a very good blended environment where outbound advisors are also taking inbound calls as a result of the outbound, that can certainly play into the SMS and email market. So probably most, if not all, of the people on this call will have, I guess, one or two mobiles on them right now that have email. But how often do we go and change our mobile telephone numbers? As you know, the latest iPhone 4S is better on Vodafone than maybe O2 or something. So certainly mobile email is really opening that world up. I think also from an outbound perspective, we're seeing more SMS being used as a customer service element. So for appointment booking, potentially it's a confirmation of the appointment that's just been agreed. From a collections environment, it could potentially be used for confirmation of the monies agreed. From a sales environment, typically it's a thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me kind of message. So absolutely, SMS is becoming significantly more important. And also what we're beginning to see now is also using the likes of SMS for post-call surveys as well, rather than just using advisors. Where this becomes quite interesting is that it's an automated service as such, similar to an IVR, but a little bit more personal, because the customer feels it's being sent to their device rather than just a generic message that's being played to everyone. So you're absolutely right. SMS is going to become a lot bigger. I think it can certainly help improve the contact types and the time of contact, because you can almost use it as a tool by which to get the customer to give you a call back on. And in those particular scenarios, if you are able to route those calls to the most effective advisors, then of course you're going to be making more from those customers that you otherwise potentially would never been able to speak to. So it's a really good question. Certainly from the both of them, SMS and email is where we're beginning to see more of the proactive market going, yes.
Yeah, and I think certainly as we get more sort of mobile devices coming through, we'll probably see a rise in that. Interesting comment, a couple of comments on workforce management. The first one comes in from Girish, who said we've been considering using a workforce management tool based on connect rates, but they've noticed their connect rates are better between 10:30 in the morning and noon, and then from 3 p.m. till 8 p.m. And I've asked the question of how do you manage agents' expectations with this this time frame? Because I guess there's a big hole in the middle of the day. Antonia, I guess it's all down to shift patterns, is it?
It is, yes, and it's also down to offering agents the choices around when they would like to work, and this is really where some of the agent engagement tools come in. So flexible working is a challenge in any call center environment, because most types of agents would prefer stability and knowing exactly what they're going to be working for the next 6 months. But if you are able to find agents who are willing to work flexible hours, or you can incentivize agents to work flexible hours, then a workforce planning tool can most certainly help you to offer up the types of shifts to cover very peaky periods based on connect rates like that. And also, so for example, agents who are able to enter in their preferences of when they like to work, or agents who are able to be incentivized by earning additional holiday hours through working very peaky shifts. Those types of incentives can be best facilitated through a tool. Unfortunately, there's nothing the tool can do to flatten out the demand or the spikes. But it can most certainly provide you with kind of engagement tools to offer agents choices so that they can they can choose when they would like to work. And it becomes more interesting when you start to consider agents who are able to dial in from home and take or make calls from home if you're considering home-based agents, because you can also manage that through a workforce management tool which will allow them to bid on the types of shifts they'd like to work or enter in their preferences around these types of shifts.
Okay, interesting. We've got some interesting observations here. Lindsay says, convenient time to talk. I think this was going back to my session. Could this possibly be seen as an opportunity for the outbound agent to pass the buck on workload by persuading the customer for a later call? So I guess really on that one, I think the solution would probably be to listen to the call recordings of what the agent is saying, and then you could pick up from there. I guess you could look at conversion rates by individual person, or the number, if your IT system allows to do the number of ones coming back. Dave, any ideas on that one?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, in any outbound contact center, you're always going to have these types of things to be concerned about. Where my advice would kind of sit around that is have a look at the amount of callbacks that are being set and also the quality of those callbacks. So by simply tracking the performance of the callback set, or maybe even the time, I think we're probably all very well aware of the unfortunate symptom of getting lots of calls at around about 6 o'clock in the evening, because the advisors probably aren't drilling down into what the customer needs, or the customer needs are, so actually getting a firm commitment from them. Looking at the amount of contact, the amount of callbacks, and the amount of time the advisor has been spending on those callbacks is certainly going to be the key to making sure that you can minimise that type of behaviour. But you know, it's a very good question. We see it all the time, unfortunately, but it's the nature of outbound, I'm afraid.
Yeah, wonderful. And one last question we've got time for. We've got lots of questions. We will circulate these around around our speakers for the people who've not been able to ask a question. And this is about the Ofcom rules. Dave, is there a requirement under the Ofcom rules to leave a message on any connected calls which are not presented to an agent? So I guess this is leaving a message rather than silent calls.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jonty, unfortunately, whilst you were off, I think we answered that, and I think we got a follow-up on it. So the simple answer is yes. If a call is connected but you don't have enough advisors available, that is exactly where you would need to play a message to the customer, yes. Otherwise it would be considered a silent call.
Thanks very much. Well,